Welcome to 21st Sports Recap and Reaction for the Minnesota Vikings versus the San Francisco 49ers in their Week 1 matchup in the 2015 regular season, taking place September 14, 2015. And we're going to go over the scoring summary. We're also going to go over the stats and give our analysis. But in the second quarter, with less than a minute left before halftime, is when the game saw its first score, as it was a defensive battle early on. But with 47 seconds on the clock left in the first half, Carlos Hyde runs it in from 10 yards out. Dawson hits the extra point. It was 7-0 Niners over the Vikings, heading into the locker room at halftime. Then in the third quarter, with about 4.5 minutes left before the fourth, Phil Dawson hit a 30-yard field goal, and that made it 10-0 San Francisco over Minnesota. Minnesota would finally get on the scoreboard a little over 15 seconds into the fourth quarter when Blair Walsh hit a 37-yard field goal to cut the San Francisco lead to 7, with the score 49ers 10, Vikings 3. But the Vikings would then let up a second rushing touchdown to Carlos Hyde, who ran it in from 17 yards out to put the Niners up 17-3 over the Vikings with about 9.5 minutes left to play in this game. And then, with about 6 minutes left to play, Phil Dawson hit a 25-yard field goal to make it 20-3, and that would remain the final score as the Niners held on to win this one by 17 points. So they handled the Vikings pretty handily, as their defense was dominant, as their defense was playing even better, even despite having lost so many starters on both sides of the ball. But let's look at the stats. Colin Kaepernick, 17 for 26, 165 passing yards, no touchdowns, but no interceptions. He did rush the ball 7 times for 41 yards. Teddy Bridgewater, 23 for 32 with 231 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 1 interception. The game's leading rusher in the real breakout performance here was Carlos Hyde. He had 26 carries for 168 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also had 2 receptions for 14 yards, as he has taken over sole duty in the running game. As Reggie Bush actually went down, they did have Haney, the rugby player, get in there for a couple carries. He had 4 carries for 13 yards. He also had a reception for 7 yards, despite fumbling a punt earlier in the game. And on the other side, Adrian Peterson, just 10 carries for only 31 yards, averaging just 3.1 yards in this game. He had 3 receptions for 21 yards. He really wasn't on the field much of the second half. Once they got down, they just started passing the ball. Bridgewater did have 16 yards off of 3 carries to go along with his 231 passing yards, by the way. The leading receiver in the game was actually Mike Wallace for the Vikings with 6 receptions for 63 yards. The tight end Kyle Rudolph had 5 receptions for 53 yards. And on the other side, Vernon Davis, the tight end for San Francisco, was their leading receiver with 3 receptions for 47 yards. Selleck had 3 receptions for 40 yards. And Anquan Bolden, 4 receptions for 36 yards. Then we look at the defense, and that's really where the Niners shined in this game, as they were tough and dominant. Really in the trenches on both sides of the ball, the Niners were playing very tough, as they were very physical on the offensive line and on the defensive line. They had 5 sacks in this game. Antoine Bethea, the safety, had 7 tackles and 1 sack. And then Bowman, their star linebacker, had 7 tackles and 1 sack as well. Tart had 4 tackles and a sack. Lynch, 3 tackles and a sack. And Carradine, 1 tackle and 1 sack. So it's a total of 5 sacks for the team. Brock also had an interception. And on the other side for the Vikings, Anthony Barr had 10 tackles in this game. And Griffin and Greenway combined for 1 sack, having a half a sack each. Newman and Rhodes each had 7 tackles out of the secondary for Minnesota. The defense, though, was very dominant, like I said, for both teams really early on, but then just throughout the whole game, the Niners were just really dominant up front on the line, holding Adrian Peterson to just 31 yards, and also holding the Minnesota Vikings as a whole to just 3 points. They did not get in the end zone at all in this game. So the Niners, I thought they were going to be a lot worse than this, and it was a big shock to me to see how physical, how tough, and how good they were, especially on the offensive line, like I said, and throughout the defense. It seemed like they are not missing anyone or missing a beat whatsoever. And Tom Sula, man, I'll tell you, he actually did one heck of a job here tonight. So I was haven't really said anything too favorably about him leading up to this game, but he definitely proved me wrong with this one for sure. And the Niners had 25 first downs compared to 17 first downs for Minnesota. They shut down the Vikings on third downs, allowing just 1 third down conversion out of 9. That's just an 11% conversion ratio for the Vikings on third downs. And the Niners were 5 for 12 on third downs, just 41%, but that's 5 times as many conversions on third down as the Vikings. Total net yards, the Niners had 395, and the Vikings just 248. And on the ground, the Niners netted 230 to just 71 for Minnesota. San Francisco did have less net passing yards at 165 versus 177 for the Vikings. As the 5 sacks dropped Bridgewater for a total of 54 yards. Kaepernick was sacked one time, but he did not lose any yards on that play. And the time of possession was in favor of the Niners, 33 minutes and 2 seconds to 26 minutes and 58 seconds for Minnesota. They said it was close early on. They didn't get the first score until less than a minute left in the first half. But once they did get on the scoreboard, it was all Niners pretty much there on out. And they said they were dominant all night long on defense. And the Minnesota defense was playing good early, but they just were on the field a little bit too much as the Vikings struggled to really get their offense going. Bridgewater did end up with over 200 yards passing. They did have that interception. And just the running game never happened for Minnesota. And that was really what was missing, was that Bridgewater didn't have any support on the ground. So it pretty much ended up where Minnesota was just passing the ball, trying to play catch-up once they got down. And the Niners were getting in there with a pass rush. They got 5 sacks. They did get that pickoff, and they were just dominant, just shutting them down on the run, shutting down the pass. The Niners looking really good on defense. Like I said, their offensive line allowed Hyde to put up 168 yards, Kaepernick 41, another 13 for Haney, and Bush even had 8 yards before leaving the game due to injury. So the final score, San Francisco 20, Minnesota 3. Let me know what you think about this game in the comments section below. Definitely interested to read your thoughts and opinions about this game between the Vikings and the Niners. Thank you very much for listening. It is greatly appreciated. I hope you're having a good day and had a good weekend and enjoyed all the sports.